Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the humid green lungs of the ancient Yucatan, where the air smells like wet stone and crushed leaves, and your sandals squish with each step over mossy temple stones. You trudge slowly past torchlit walls covered in strange glyphs, and up above through thick jungle mist, you catch glimpses of more stars than you've ever seen. But you're not here to stargaze. You're here because high atop this temple platform, a priest is watching the sky brow, furrowed fingers tracing invisible lines between constellations. He's doing math, old math, quiet, beautiful, brain-melting math, and if he gets it wrong, tomorrow's ceremony. Well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on a woven mat near the base of a temple, still catching your breath after the climb. The air is hot, but somehow still electric. You hear chants drifting down from the top, slow and measured like a metronome of voices. You don't speak the language, not really, but something about the rhythm tells you what's going on. This is not just worship, it's calculation. These priests aren't just praying to the stars, they're plotting them. The Maya didn't casually admire the stars, they obsessed over them. They tracked Venus like a celebrity. They watched the moon like it owed them money. And what's wild is, they were good at it. Centuries before Galileo ever peeked through a telescope, Maya astronomers could predict solar eclipses, lunar cycles, and planetary movements with such eerie precision you'd think they had satellites. Here's a fun fact to stuff into your dream pocket. Venus, the bright morning and evening star, was sacred to the Maya. Its cycle was so important that wars were timed around its appearances. Not birthdays, not rainy seasons. Historians still argue whether Maya astronomers were using naked eye observations alone or if they had optical tools we just haven't uncovered yet. The calculations they managed, especially with their understanding of synodic periods, the cycle of a planet's return to a particular point in the sky, are suspiciously accurate for a civilization without glass lenses. Fringe researchers like to theorize about secret water mirrors or polished obsidian viewfinders. Most mainstream scholars smile politely and keep digging through more glyphs. And that's the thing, so much of what we do know comes from those strange curling symbols carved into temple walls and painted in codices. They look like a mix between hieroglyphics and emojis. And often they don't just tell stories, they record time, complex dates, star charts, predictions. You realize something eerie. This temple isn't just a holy place, it's a cosmic spreadsheet. A priest, his face painted with ochre and ash, is now kneeling beside you. He's not here for you, don't worry, but you're allowed to watch. He unrolls a bark paper codex and begins muttering the names of dates. They don't sound like numbers to you, but they are. He's reading a calendar, he's measuring centuries. And his calm confidence as he does it makes you feel like you're in the presence of someone who understands the universe more intimately than your entire high school science department. And you want to laugh, because let's be honest, the last time you looked up at the stars, it was probably just to double check if it was going to rain tomorrow. But this priest, he's watching Venus and Jupiter dance across the sky, calculating their tango with math older than most empires. He's not just thinking about tomorrow, he's thinking in millennia. We often picture ancient people as superstitious, primitive, and kind of math-averse, but that's a modern myth. The Maya prove it wrong. With every eclipse they nailed, every temple they aligned to a solstice. Remember, this is a world without calculators, no Excel spreadsheets, not even an abacus, just minds trained to hold celestial patterns like songs. And oh, speaking of songs, Maya rituals often used rhythm as a way to teach math. Think of it like musical multiplication. Beats would match star phases. Dances would represent time cycles. So if you thought memorizing your times tables was annoying, imagine having to dance them every week. And then imagine if your entire community was judging your rhythm, because whether you nailed that number, beat might determine the start of planting season. No pressure. Here's the fringe kicker. For tonight, some anthropologists suspect that Maya math wasn't just functional, it was psychedelic. Yeah. Certain ceremonies involving counting and calendrical calculations were performed under the influence of hallucinogenic mushrooms or tobacco so potent it could make your eyebrows feel like they were humming. Numbers weren't just tools, they were visions. Historians still argue whether these mind-expanding rituals enhanced or confused astronomical accuracy, but let's be honest, those temple alignments don't lie. You glance up at the stars again, and for the first time, they feel less like decorations and more like ticking gears in a divine machine. You realize how much math surrounds you everywhere. Every heartbeat, every step, every flicker of starlight is part of a rhythm in the Maya. They had the sheet music. The priest has finished his chant. He nods to the sky. Tomorrow there will be an eclipse, just as predicted, and you get this shiver not from fear, but from awe. You're not watching ancient superstition. You're watching science, cloaked in feathers and incense. And just like that, the math begins. You sit cross-legged now a bit deeper into the jungle. There's a clearing here, damp earth under your thighs, mosquitoes testing your patience, and in front of you is something that looks like a game board carved into stone. It's covered in dots lines and a peculiar little shell shape. No numbers, no digits, yet somehow this is where the Maya made math sing. You lean closer, 1 dot, 2 dots, 3, 4, then a horizontal line that's 5, another dot above it, that's 6. It clicks. The Maya didn't use symbols for every number the way you do. They had a base system, dot equals 1, line equals 5, and that shell. Believe it or not, that's 0. Yes, 0. The Maya not only understood it, they revered it. While the Greeks were still trying to decide whether nothing could be a number, and Europeans were centuries away from even glimpsing a 0 in their math books, the Maya were calmly carving shells into stelae to represent it, and they didn't stumble into this idea. They built a whole positional number system with it, a place value structure like the one you use now with tens and hundreds, only their base was, 20, not 10. Think about it, you count on your fingers. The Maya counted on fingers and toes. Every level up in their system was 20 times the last. So now you're playing with real fire. The bottom layer of dots and lines is units. Above that, that's 20s. Above that, 400s. But here's the sneaky twist. One position isn't exactly x20. It's x18. Why? Because of the Maya obsession with the mercalendar. More on that later, but for now, just know it made their math incredibly versatile, flexible, almost poetic. You test the stone with your own hand. 2 lines and 3 dots, that's 13. Add another line, that's 18. You see how they could calculate entire moon cycles using simple pebbles or ink marks on bark paper. You're doing it yourself now, your fingers unconsciously tapping the math. Here's a quirky tidbit that makes you grin. Some scribes are believed to have carried portable math kits. Not unlike kids with pencil boxes, small wooden boards, bits of maize, kernels, or obsidian chips as counters. Tiny portable Mayan spreadsheets. One anthropologist joked they were the world's first pocket calculators, only you had to be really good at remembering where your screen ended. Historians still argue whether the Maya invented the system entirely on their own, or were influenced by earlier Mesoamerican cultures like the Olmec. But it's undeniable that they took the concept and ran with it up pyramids through centuries and into astronomy, economics, and royal propaganda. And yes, it was propaganda. The rulers used math not just to manage, but to intimidate. Picture a massive stone monument announcing that the king ruled on the 9th Bagtun, the 12th Khatun, the 2nd Tun, the 0th Winil, and the 16th Kian. That's not just a fancy date. That's a math flexing. A way to say I've aligned myself with cosmic time and you haven't. There's something beautiful about how tactile Maya numbers are. They weren't abstract. They were drawn, carved, painted. You didn't scribble a 7. You crafted it from dots and lines, each stroke full of intent. If modern math feels cold and distant, sometimes Maya math feels warm. Handmade. You can practically smell the ink and wood. Now you're sitting with a young scribe, a teenager maybe dipping a stylus into red dye and tapping it gently onto the smooth bark paper page. He's not solving equations the way you know them, but he's building relationships between numbers. How many days since the last eclipse? How long until the next planting? How old is the moon tonight? His math has rhythm. Oh, and there's your second eyebrow raiser of the evening. In some cases, the Maya wrote numbers before names. They didn't say Lord Jaguar of the East born on this day. They said on 9/15/10.0 was born Lord Jaguar of the East. The date came first. Time always took priority. You were just a character in its ongoing play. You run your fingers along the edge of the number system again. The shell of 0 feels smooth, almost soft against the stone. It's humbling. You're touching a concept that took Europe over 1,000 years to properly embrace. And the Maya, they just got it. No dramatic philosophical debate, no holy wars over nothingness. Just a shell, a gentle curve to mark the beginning or the end. You wonder, did they know how far ahead they were? Historians still debate that too. Some believe the Maya developed this system largely for calendrical use, meaning they didn't see math as a general-purpose tool like modern civilizations do. Others argue they must have used it for things like construction engineering and trade. We just haven't found all the evidence yet. Maybe because so much was written on fragile bark paper. Maybe because the jungle eats everything. What's left is scattered stone inscriptions, clay fragments, the occasional codex that escaped colonial fire. But every time we decipher another glyph, another number, another little curled up shell, we're reminded just how quietly genius the Maya really were. And here you are, sitting cross-legged in the humid dark, smiling like you've just cracked a code. Because you kinda have. The air shifts. It's subtle, just the faintest breeze stirring the torch smoke, but it carries something. Drums. Low, steady like a heartbeat made of stone. You glance toward the center of the city. A procession is winding through the plaza, and leading the way are men in jaguar pelts, their faces streaked with red paint. But they aren't here to fight, not tonight. They're timekeepers, astronomer priests, and what they're escorting a carved stone wheel larger than a grown man. It rolls slowly on logs, creaking like thunder. You follow behind footsteps, soft heart pounding in rhythm with the drums. You've heard whispers that tonight marks a turning point, a once-in-a-generation celestial alignment. For the Maya, the stars don't just twinkle, they command. And the math required to keep up with their orders, it's about to take center stage. In the middle of the plaza, the wheel is lifted and set into place, clicking perfectly into a stone track lined with glyphs. Around it, priests take up positions, each holding bundles of codices and notched sticks. One scribe crouches, unfurling a page that seems impossibly long, its surface shimmering with ink made from crushed beetles. You crouch beside him. What's he doing? Tracking an eclipse? Nope. He's preparing to measure a god's appointment. You see, Maya calendars weren't just about tracking days. They were about honoring the exact moment when gods reappeared, when celestial doors opened, when time folded in on itself and spat out prophecy. It was mystical, yes, but driven by brutal brain aching. Math! The Maya had not one, not two, but 3 primary calendars, and they ran all at once. The first, the Ozolkan, a 260-day ritual calendar, cycling through 20 day names and 13 numbers like a spinning bingo cage. Every day had a personality of fate, a role in divine drama. The second, the Hob, a 365-day solar calendar. Sounds familiar? Well, kind of. It had 18 months of 20 days each, plus a weird little 5-day period at the end called the Wayeb, a kind of spiritual blackout zone where anything could go wrong and usually did. And then because 2 calendars aren't stressful enough, there was the Null calendar round. Defs, a 52-year cycle that combines the Solukin and Hob like interlocking gears. A specific day name and number pairing would only repeat every 18,980 days. Miss that. See you in half a century. Historians still argue whether the 260-day calendar was based on human gestation, the zenith of the sun, or something else entirely. Theories range from agriculture to astronomy to full-on mysticism. One theory even suggests it mirrors the number of visible Venus risings over a certain cycle. Fringe, maybe, but the math supports it. And now, back in the plaza, the priests are watching Venus rise. You squint at the horizon. A tiny shimmer appears bright and sharp. The morning star, right on cue. You glance at the scribe's scroll. He's written down the exact number of days since Venus last rose in this position. 584 days. The Maya knew that number intimately. They didn't round, they didn't estimate. They nailed it again and again without a telescope. Now imagine being the person responsible for getting that count wrong. Imagine telling the king that tonight's ritual would summon Kukulkan only to realize you miscounted the Tzolk'in and the Hob and accidentally scheduled a minor deity instead. That's not just embarrassing, that's dangerous. Because here's the twist, Maya rulers weren't just political, they were cosmic mediators. If the math failed, the universe could be thrown out of whack. Crops could die, rivers could vanish, children could be born on cursed days. So yeah, those drummers, they're not just setting a mood, they're measuring time. The beats are perfectly spaced, echoing the rhythm of the Venus cycle, the sun's arc, the moon's tilt. The air hums with tension. This isn't superstition. This is cosmic bookkeeping at a scale few cultures ever attempted. Another little gem, some glyphs suggest that Maya priests performed public math ceremonies. Imagine town squares where thousands gathered not for gladiator games, not for executions, but for math. The scribe would stand before the crowd, scroll in hand, reciting counts, aligning cycles, solving for cosmic events as children watched with wide eyes and probably half-finished cacao treats. You lean in close to the scribe now. His fingers dance. Dot, dot, dot. Line, shell, line, dot. He's recording today's date in all 3 calendar systems, and you suddenly realize this isn't just math. This is history. Because Maya time wasn't linear, it was cyclical. Every day echoed an older one. Every pattern hinted at return. That's why the calendar round of Farit mattered so much. A king born on a certain day might echo a legendary ruler from centuries earlier. A battle fought on a particular day could resonate with an ancient conquest. History was not about progress. It was about pattern, and math was how you found it. The wheel in the plaza begins to turn slowly. Priests chant. You feel your pulse sync with the rhythm. You don't understand the words, not exactly, but the numbers. Oh, those are starting to feel familiar. Dots and lines, shells and cycles. You see the logic now, the elegance. And when Venus finally clears the trees, hanging low and defiant in the dawn blue sky, a cheer rises. Because once again, the math was right. Once again, the cosmos has confirmed the Maya's calculations. You lie back dizzy, not from fatigue, but from the realization that you've never truly seen time before tonight. Not like this. You're lying on a stone bench now, back still warm from the sun that just slipped behind a pyramid's sharp silhouette. Nearby, a group of children laugh as they leap over carved glyphs in the plaza, skipping like it's hopscotch. But this isn't just a game. It's a counting lesson. You blink slowly, letting your ears settle into the background noise of a civilization running on numbers. Everything here, everything, is governed by a structure so mathematically complex, it makes your modern calendar look like a napkin doodle. And what drives it? Sacred numbers, 2 of them in particular, 13 and Umatunsai. Together they form the backbone of Maya timekeeping religion and identity. You know how your weeks are built around 7 days? Try a 260-day ritual cycle, where every day has its own name and meaning. That's the Azolkin. Remember, it combines 13 numbers with 20 day names in a rotating loop that never repeats the same combination until 260 days have passed, and you thought trying to remember your password rotation was tricky. Here's the beauty of it. You don't just have Monday, Tuesday vibes. You have days like Eka X, which breathes air and inspiration, or Can rich with fertility and maize. You're not just counting time, you're moving through layers of personality. Every birthday is a cosmic label, a story coded in math and mythology. And 13. Oh, 13 isn't unlucky here. It's divine. The Maya believed the heavens were structured in 13 levels, each inhabited by specific gods and forces. The underworld, that got 9. Nice, moody symmetry. These weren't just superstitions, they were systems, a framework of numbers wrapped tightly around their entire worldview. Now, here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Some scholars think the 20-number system, the all-base 20 might be tied not just to fingers and toes, but to counting rituals performed on the body. Each finger and toe a counting point with added reverence to the head and heart as capstones. Math wasn't abstract, it was anatomical. You reach down and start counting with your fingers, 1, 2, 3. By the time you reach your pinky toe, that's 20. And if you were a Maya priest, you'd probably mark each beat with a tiny chant, eyes rolling back as your mind spun through endless calendar cycles. Numbers weren't just neutral, they meant things. Here's where it gets wild. Every major decision, marriages, travel, war, corn planting was filtered through this numerical code. You didn't just get married next month, you waited until a job. Maybe when Venus ruled the sky and death spirits slept. You didn't go to war until your priest confirmed it was Spudut's 9 Kantokur, a hot combative day. Historians still argue whether this system made the Maya more superstitious or more stable. Did living by numbers keep their society synchronized like clockwork, or did it trap them in a looping web of divine appointments and cosmic caution tape? Hard to say. But here's what's certain: it gave meaning to time, and meaning to you. Say you're born on 12 bin. That means you carry the energy of growth of reeds pushing upward through the swamp, with the numerical force of 12 linked to social harmony and ritual power. Your name might even reflect that. 12 reeds. Imagine meeting someone called 5 Death at a party, or 7 Rain. You'd probably remember their birthday. A whisper drifts from the steps behind you, an old man teaching a child how to calculate a birthday reading. 7 and then BN, he says, tracing the symbols on a clay tablet. Next comes the Hob. He's about to show the kid how to merge the 260-day sacred cycle with the 365-day solar one. You lean in spellbound. And here's a fringe theory for dessert. Some anthropologists suspect that the numbers 13, Fulm, and 126 were encoded into not just a calendar, but into all temple architecture, ceremonial steps, and even royal clothing, like a secret math language etched into everything, whispering to the initiated. Imagine your socks containing hidden Fibonacci spirals. Suddenly, you remember that monument from earlier, the one with all those repeating glyphs. You thought it was just decorative, but now you're not so sure. Maybe that spiral of dots and lines wasn't art, it was math. Maybe the entire plaza is one big equation, and you've been napping on top of the equal sign. You glance up, the sky is darkened into velvet, the stars are back. A priest lights a torch and walks the perimeter muttering a count. 13 steps, 20 breaths, the sacred numbers again. You feel them. Around, you pressing gently on the world like a hidden skeleton. And here's something that hits you in the chest. These numbers aren't passive, they're alive. Every 260-day cycle is like a season of a cosmic show. The cast rotates, the drama intensifies. Every day a new actor takes the stage. You're not just living in time, you're participating in it. Even modern Maya communities still use elements of this system. Daykeepers, men and women trained to read the calendar, still calculate births, deaths, and ceremonies using 13s and 20s. The system never died, it just whispered itself into survival. So you settle in the stone bench, cooling under your skin. In the distance, drums begin again, but softer now. A calendar chant, a night prayer in numbers. You can almost count along. Dot, dot, line, shell. Time as always continues. You're staring into the fire now. Not a crackling campfire, mind you. This one burns inside a stone brazier shaped like a jaguar's mouth. The flames leap in strange colors fed by crushed herbs and resins that smell like pine and something sharper. Around you, the villagers have gone quiet. Children peek from behind woven mats. Elders bow their heads. A priest begins to chant. This is no ordinary evening. It's the end of the shul. Calendar round. A rare moment of terror, hope, and mathematical beauty that only comes once every 52 years. You squint up at the sky. No stars. Just clouds like bruised silk, moving fast. The air is still and watching. Everyone here knows what this night means. The Maya believed that when the 260-day sacred calendar, Tzolk'in, and the 365-day solar calendar, Hab, finally realign after 18,980 days, the world is in cosmic limbo. For one long breath, the universe resets, everything balances, and that balance, it's delicate. You shiver not from cold, but from the sense that time itself is on a tightrope. Tonight, the gods decide whether to start the clocks again, and if they don't, well, better to not dwell on that. But let's just say more than a few people over the centuries have buried amulets, sacrificed turkeys, and sometimes larger offerings, and checked their math very carefully before this night. Because here's where Maya genius and anxiety collide in the most spectacular fashion. You see, the calendar round isn't just an astronomical event, it's a mathematical interlock, a complex alignment of cycles that requires priests to track decades of daily counts without error. Imagine carrying a countdown in your head for half a century. Forget Y2K, this was Y52. And yes, Maya priests trained for this. A young boy might begin counting days at age 5. By the time he's an old man, he's lived through one full round. If he's lucky and precise, he might live to see a second, but very few did. This night it's rare, weighty, sacred. Now here's a quirky little tradition to give your dreams some flavor. When the final day of the round approached Maya, families often extinguished all household fires. The night was spent in darkness, fear, and fasting. Why? Because if the gods chose not to restart time, keeping your fire going would be seen as arrogant, as if you assumed you'd survive the reset. Best to let the coals die just in case. Then if dawn came, if the sun returned and the cycle continued, new fire would be lit in the temples and carried through the city, family by family, to reignite hearths. It was a literal spark of hope. Historians still argue whether this custom was strictly calendrical, or if it tied into other doomsday beliefs like the idea that certain gods might destroy the world if rituals weren't precisely timed. One glyph even refers to a night when the sky was almost torn, a poetic, terrifying echo of cosmic disaster narrowly avoided. You glance at the priest again. He's drawing in the dirt now, not pictures. Numbers. Dots lines a shell, then another row, then another. He's calculating the burn-off timed the moment when the old calendar round will finish and the new one might begin. His voice is steady, but his eyes are tense. You inch closer and peek at the figures. You recognize the structure now, 18 months of 20 days, plus 5 dangerous nameless days at the end. You notice he's added a line of charcoal next to the last shell symbol, a marker, the however 0 point. The fire inside the jaguar mouth dims. For a moment, everything seems to lean forward, like the world itself is listening. And then, light. A runner appears at the far end of the plaza holding a torch. Cheers erupt, cautious at first, then louder. The fire is passed to the temple priest, then to others. The new cycle has begun. You watch flames leap from brazier to brazier, home to home like living math. Here's something to boggle your sleepy brain. The Maya calculated not just these 52-year loops, but enormous spans of time called baktuns, periods of days. These were stacked into even larger units, eventually forming what scholars call the long count. We're talking millions of days recorded with precision, all from a civilization that wrote with sharpened reeds and painted on bark. One of the longest inscriptions ever found. It tracks a date. Billions of days in the future. Historians still aren't sure why. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was prophecy. Maybe they just liked flexing their mathematical muscles. And here's the fringe gem of the night. Some believe the calendar round was more than a calendar. It may have served as a personality clock, a way of matching human traits to cosmic alignments, not unlike astrology, but far more intricate. Think of it like a zodiac that changes daily instead of monthly. Your date of birth could determine your role in society, your marriage prospects, even your potential as a priest. You watch as people gather around their relit fires. The fear is gone now. It's replaced by joy, laughter, food. The kids are back to hopscotch. The old man is cracking corn in a stone mortar, smiling as if he personally restarted the sun. And you're thinking about how close they cut it. How many calculations had to be right, how a few misplaced dots could have unspooled the entire web of belief. But they weren't misplaced, they were perfect, because the Maya didn't just believe in numbers, they trusted them. You lie back, hands behind your head, eyes on the sky that's no longer angry. The cycle continues, time has begun again, and the math as always holds. You're climbing again. This time it's not just a quick stroll up a temple's edge for the view. No. You're ascending something more precise, each step cut to exact dimensions, each angle mathematically tuned, each shadow deliberately planned. And once you reach the top, breath short, calves aching, you get it. You're standing on the calculator. A giant one, made of stone. The temple before you, likely dedicated to Kukulkan or another god with way too many feathers, isn't just a spiritual monument, it's an astronomical instrument, a solar device. And if you time your visit just right, it becomes something more a stage for a cosmic illusion pulled off with pure math and a lot of clever stonework. Take El Castillo, the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, just as the sun begins to set, a serpentine shadow slithers down the pyramid staircase. The steps cast triangles of darkness that line up exactly with the stone serpent's head at the base, creating the illusion of movement. Now remember, no computers, no blueprints, no calculators. This whole spectacle relies on perfect alignment, orientation, and geometry, all orchestrated by people tracking celestial cycles using naked eyes and what shells, dots, and lines. You try not to lose your balance as you crouch at the top edge. The steps below stretch like ribs, all 91 on each side. 4 sides, 91 steps each, plus the top platform. 365 steps total. 1 for each day of the solar year. Coincidence? Please. The Maya don't do coincidence. You look across the city and realize this is just one piece of a larger puzzle. The building's ball courts and temples are arranged in patterns that echo planetary movements. There's math under your feet, geometry in the city's bones. Here's a niche, but delightful tidbit. Some researchers believe the Maya use acoustic mathematics in their architecture. Clap your hands at the base of a staircase and the echo bounces back like a bird chirp, specifically the cry of the Quetzal, a sacred bird. Was this planned? Historians still argue whether it's intentional design or a poetic accident. Either way, it's eerie, beautiful, too perfect to ignore. You sit down now, feeling the warmth of the stone seeping through your bones. A priest approaches, dragging a long stick with carved notches. He places it into a slot in the floor and angles it toward the sun. It's a gnomon, a shadow-casting tool, like a sundial but smarter. The Maya didn't just mark hours. They tracked solstices, equinoxes, and zenith days. Those rare times when the sun passes directly overhead and shadows disappear. You shade your eyes. The sun is almost at the apex. Soon the priest will make an incision into the temple's interior, just a slit angled perfectly so that sunlight pierces a chamber on a specific day, illuminating a single glyph. Maybe it marks a god's birthday, maybe a sacred date. Either way, the precision is unreal. And this isn't an isolated case. Temples across the Maya world align with celestial events. Some line up with Venus's rising point. Others face moonsets or eclipse cycles. These weren't just spiritual choices, they were mathematical alignments. Carved into stone, reinforced by ritual, and confirmed by the night sky again and again. Imagine being one of the architects. No calculators, no laser levels, just obsidian tools, star charts, and years of careful observation. Every stone laid down based on a cosmic rhythm, every angle checked against the sun's stubborn schedule. And when it all worked, when the shadow snake slithered down the steps, when the sunbeam struck the altar, dead center, you weren't just an architect. You were a magician, a math sorcerer. You'd proven that you understood the universe. Here's something fringe to chew on. Some fringe theorists suggest the Maya may have used liquid water to simulate the sky in bowls, essentially using the surface as a lens or mirror to track stars. Still debated, but given their accuracy, you can't completely dismiss it. These people were measuring ecliptic latitudes with clay bowls and calendar math. Meanwhile, you once used your phone's calculator to split a restaurant bill 4 ways and still overpaid. You glanced down at the city again. The people below looked tiny, moving through shadows cast by buildings that double as calendars. Every shadow a message, every ray of light a line in an equation. And what's maybe most beautiful of all, these temples weren't just scientific tools. They were sacred spaces. The Maya didn't divide science from spirituality. Math was a prayer. Geometry was a blessing. Architecture was cosmology in stone. You start your descent counting the steps 1, 2, 3, each one a unit of time. By the time you reach the base, the sun has begun to shift. The shadows are starting their dance, and you realize you're walking through a calculator built to last forever. As the sun lowers and the serpent's shadow creeps downward, people gather in awe. The children gasp, the elders nod knowingly, and the priest beside you whispers something in a language older than most stars. But the math, that's eternal. You're sitting under the eaves of a small sunlit building, now one of the quieter corners of the city. The plaza's far behind you, the pyramid a silhouette in the haze. And right here in this shaded little courtyard, you're watching something surprisingly relatable school. Except it's not rows of desks and chalkboards, no bells, no backpacks. It's mats on the ground, kids in finely woven tunics, and a teacher who looks like he's never raised his voice in his life. His hair is oiled back, his fingers stained with red ink, his students nobles, and the lesson of the day, math. Glorious, sacred, grueling Maya math. You can almost hear the groans of young minds forced to wrestle with dots, lines, base 20 math problems, and the endless rotations of the ritual calendar. But there's no skipping class here, not for these kids. They're being trained to be priests, scribes, astronomers, court advisors, the living calculators of their society. You miss a lesson, and you might accidentally reschedule a coronation on a cursed day. Not ideal. The teacher places a thin bark paper codex in front of one boy. The pages unfold like an accordion filled with precise glyphs. You lean over and try to read them. It's a birth record. The boy is calculating the future sacred anniversaries of a royal uncle. His brow furrows as he taps out sequences using corn kernels as counters. Dot, line, shell, dot. And you realize these are children doing math more advanced than most high schoolers today. Here's a mainstream fact that makes you sit up straighter. Maya scribes, even from a young age, had to memorize entire cycles of time. Not just years, but katuns, baktuns, and the massive long count. That's like growing up learning multiplication geometry and in time as an interlocking set of cosmic gears. Not all children were allowed this education, of course. The majority of Maya kids were likely taught practical math at home, counting maize tracking days, helping with market exchanges. But noble children, they were math royalty. They trained in schools called houses of the scribe, learning not only how to calculate dates, but how to record them on stelae and codices on murals. One mistake in glyph writing could ruin a temple dedication or offend a god. A quirky tidbit for you, the Maya likely used songs and old chant patterns to memorize complex math and calendar sequences. Imagine singing your times tables, but in a 13-note rhythm that corresponds to the moon's position in the sky. Fun. Sure, terrifying a little. And if you think ancient school was all gentle rhythms and pretty ink, not quite. Some glyphs suggest there were consequences for messing up important figures, possibly ranging from humiliation rituals to flat-out expulsion. You weren't just learning for grades, you were learning for cosmic credibility. The teacher now draws a giant circle in the dirt. The kids gather around. He marks it with dots, 5, 10, 15, 20. Then he does something strange. He splits the circle into 13 parts. Not 12. You blink. Why? You remember, 13 is sacred. He's showing them how to divide a lunar cycle across a 260-day calendar. One girl raises her hand. She asks about a specific star's rising and how it affects the planting cycle. The teacher nods approvingly. That's not just math, that's applied astronomy. She'll be a priestess one day, maybe, or a royal advisor. You smile impressed. Historians still debate how widespread formal math education was. Some think it was limited to city centers and priestly elites. Others argue that trade hubs likely had schools too, maybe less focused on rituals, more on numbers for cacao beans and obsidian blades. Either way, the depth of their mathematical training was staggering. Fringe theory of the day. Some modern numerologists believe Maya math carried oak vibrational energy, and that chanting certain number sequences could align the body's frequency with celestial rhythms. Sounds wild, but considering how seriously the Maya took sound ritual and math, it's not totally unthinkable. Besides, your body does feel a little tingly when they chant Hun Ka Ox Khan. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, by the way. Back in the courtyard, the children now practice writing numbers with delicate bone styluses. Their hands tremble slightly, partly from nerves, partly because the ink is thick and slow. The teacher corrects one boy's 18 with a soft click of the tongue. The shell's in the wrong place, a small mistake, but in Maya math, tiny errors echo for centuries. You're offered a stylus and you try it yourself. A single dot, then a line. It feels natural now, like sketching a thought. You're not just drawing a number, you're summoning it. The class ends with a chant, melodic, mathematical, hypnotic. The children file out, chattering, laughing, comparing glyphs like trading cards. The sun is lower now, shadows stretching across the courtyard. The teacher gathers the codices with care, tucking them under one arm. You notice his final student, a quiet girl, still bent over her work. She's writing the number 144,000. You grin. She's learning all adbaktuns already. As you rise to leave, you realize something profound. These kids weren't being prepared for jobs. They were being shaped into living instruments of time, guardians of balance, calculators of destiny, and the tools they wielded, dots, lines, and shells, were sharper than any sword. You walk away, the chant still humming in your ears. The children's voices echo behind you, singing numbers like spells. Because in the Maya world, math wasn't a subject. It was a calling. You're back in the marketplace now. But this isn't some dusty bazaar where a guy with 2 chickens and a grudge is haggling over corn. No, this is a vibrant, buzzing economic engine, humming with traders, weavers, potters, and spice sellers. Bright fabrics ripple in the breeze. The smell of cacao, grilled squash, and crushed flowers is thick in the air. And here beneath the color and noise, Maya math is at work, quiet, invisible, and absolutely everywhere. You stand near a jade merchant as she unrolls a mat. One by one, she lays out carved beads, some rough, some polished, all valuable. A man in a feathered tunic kneels and begins counting them, muttering to himself. But he's not just thinking, how many? He's thinking, how much? And to do that, he has to calculate value, weight, and exchange rates across multiple goods. This isn't your average 10 chickens for 1 goat kind of scene. This is a math-fueled microeconomy, alive with ratios, conversions, and precise accounting, all done with no coins, no printed bills, and certainly no calculators. And you realize the Maya didn't need physical money like we do. They had commodity currencies, obsidian blades, cacao beans, textiles, copper bells, but the real power came from knowing the Nuk math behind them. Aqueduct. A cacao bean might get you a tamale, 100 might get you a rabbit, a woven tunic, maybe 8 obsidian blades. Unless it's dyed with cochineal red, then it's worth double. Every transaction is math in motion. You eavesdrop on a merchant calculating a bulk deal for salt. She moves kernels of corn around on a flat board, her abacus. Dots, lines, place, values. All there. No written receipt. It's all in her head and hands. You can't help but think your brain would crash halfway through the first sale. Here's a mainstream fact that ties this all together. Maya trade stretched for hundreds of miles, across jungles, rivers, and mountains. Goods moved from highland cities to coastal ports and back again, and that movement required standardized math, a way to calculate weights, distance, time, and value across city-states that spoke different dialects but shared a common, Okmasprit numerical language. Imagine walking from city to city with bundles of cloth and cacao on your back, tracking how many days it takes to reach each outpost, how much you owe in tribute at each checkpoint, and how the calendar affects local pricing. Got it all great. Now do it in base 20. Quirky tidbit for the day, some Maya carried counting strings. Think ancient spreadsheets made of cords, knots, and beads, kinda like the Inca quipu, but adapted for Mesoamerican trade. Not confirmed by all archaeologists, but there are glyphs hinting at it, and it fits. You'd want a portable math kit when bartering for jaguar pelts and chili peppers. Historians still debate how standardized these exchange systems were. Did every city have the same cacao to blade ratio? Were markets regulated or more fluid? Some think local temples acted like central banks, setting rates during festivals or planting seasons. Others believe elite merchants simply controlled prices by hoarding goods and using their math skills as leverage. Either way, if you couldn't count, you couldn't trade. You wander deeper into the market. A man is selling maize in bulk. He's offering a deal. Buy, call it 20 handfuls. Get one free. You can practically hear his mental abacus clicking, and across from him a boy calculates how many cotton balls he'll need to swap for a new sling. His mom watches approvingly as he uses his base 20 training to figure it out faster than you can say, "Hold on, let me check my calculator app." And then it hits you, this isn't just about numbers, it's about trust. Maya trade was built on the belief that both sides knew the math, that both parties understood value, time, and exchange. In a society without coinage or formal banking, but math was the currency of trust. Even taxes, yes they had, those were tied to numerical precision. City-states demanded tribute in the form of goods, and those amounts were tracked using place value systems. One temple might demand 400 cacao beans every akatun. Another might require textiles measured by arm span. And if you shorted the tribute collectors, you better hope your math was right or your excuse very convincing. Fringe theory of the day, there's a belief that some elite merchants use numerical codes to encrypt their transactions, a sort of secret guild math. The glyphs look normal, but only insiders knew how to decode the profit margin column. Totally speculative, but a delicious idea, Maya stockbrokers with feathered cloaks and stone tablets. You finally find a quiet spot near a tamale vendor. She gives you a knowing look and asks, "How many can you afford?" You pause, trying to calculate how many cacao beans you have. She laughs and does the math for you, quickly. 10 beans, 2 tamales, 1 extra, if you agree to help her son with his math homework later. Deal! You sit down and bite into the tamale. It's warm, rich, and perfectly spiced, and you realize it's not just food. It's like a math equation made edible, so grown, traded, measured, and sold within a system that turned every bite into the result of centuries of quiet genius calculation. You take another bite, then another, because honestly, you've never tasted algebra quite like this. You're drifting now. Not just in thought, your legs feel light, your ears full of distant drums and temple echoes, but your surroundings have changed. You're no longer in the bustling city or seated in a classroom or market square. You're somewhere deeper, older. You're in the heart of the jungle where vines snake around, toppled stones and moss creeps across forgotten plazas. The air is thick and damp, buzzing with insects and mystery. Above you, trees loom so tall they block out the sky. But here among the roots and ruins, the math never stopped. You've stumbled onto a forgotten observatory. The stones are cracked, the glyphs weathered, but the structure is unmistakable, perfectly circular like a drum or a cosmic lens. Small slits in the walls point at strange angles, not to let in air, but light. Light that once shone through at very specific times, solstices, equinoxes, planetary risings. This place wasn't made for crowds, it was made for precision. You brush your hand over a carving, a glyph for Venus, another for the moon, and there hidden near the floor a tiny dot and line sequence, maybe a date, maybe a warning. The jungle tried to erase it, but the math is still here, silent, waiting. Here's your historical anchor. The Maya built some of the most sophisticated observatories tours in the ancient world. Sites like Uxmal and Copan feature viewing platforms, shadow trackers, and sightlines that align exactly with celestial events. They weren't just watching stars, they were measuring them, in some cases with accuracy that rivals early telescopes. And remember, they weren't just tracking for fun. Each movement of Venus, each eclipse was a data point, a numbers in an ever-growing table of cosmic meaning. These observatories were like the NASA labs of their day, except the computers were human. Scribes, priests, men and women with obsidian ink-stained fingers and memories like calendars. Now, here's your quirky nugget. Some of these jungle observatories were decorated not with gods or kings, but with mathematical glyphs. Raw number sequences placed with reverence, as if the numbers themselves were sacred beings worthy of worship. Imagine a church where instead of stained glass saints, you see floating fractions and spirals carved in gold. Fringe theory incoming. Some researchers speculate that the Maya didn't just use these observatories for looking up. They may have also used ground alignments, tracking how light moved across floor patterns to mark time on overcast days. Picture a stone floor with a design that only makes sense when the sun hits it at just the right angle. A shadow puzzle, a secret sundial. You duck inside the broken tower. It's cool and dry, surprisingly silent. At the center, a carved post sticks up through the floor. You realize it's a gnomon, just like the one from the temple. You line your eye up with the nearest slit in the wall. Nothing yet. Then, bam! A beam of golden light slices through the hole, landing directly on the carved number at the post's base, a shell symbolizing 0. 0. It stops you. Because that more than the temples or calendars or markets is the Maya's boldest stroke of genius. They didn't just invent amazing numbers. They invented nothing. Let that settle for a moment. The Maya had a concept of 0 as early as the 4th century CE, possibly earlier. That's earlier than India, way earlier than Europe. They used it not as a placeholder, but as a functional number. A symbol, a shell, a breath before counting begins. You exhale slowly as if in sync with the math. In their system, 0 wasn't just the absence of quantity, it was potential. The start of everything, a sacred pause, a numerical egg before the serpent of time hatched out. Historians still debate whether 0 originated with the Olmecs and passed to the Maya, or whether the Maya came to it independently. Either way, they were the first to give it its own glyph and place in the number system. Not nothing, but something vital. Central. You run your finger over the shell again. It's elegant, quiet. You've never thought about zero this way before. In school, it was the grade you didn't want, the balance on a bad bank account, a placeholder. But here, it's where time starts. You stand slowly. Outside, the shadows are changing. Birds call. Somewhere you hear water, maybe a cenote nearby hidden in the undergrowth. But in your head, it's all numbers now. You're picturing how zero made the Maya number system positional? Without it, place value collapses. Suddenly, 400 becomes 40, 20 becomes 2, calendars crumble, trade falls apart, time slips off its rails. But with zero, it all works. The Maya could track thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of days. They could build long counts stretching back to the mythic birth of the world and forward into futurity. To days and dates so distant they stretch beyond your lifespan, your kids' lifespans, even your civilizations. You step outside the observatory and look up. The sky is clearing, stars prick through the canopy, and for just a moment you can feel it again, that rhythm, that pulse, not a heartbeat, not a drumbeat, a tikkun, the soft ticking logic of a people who knew the stars by name, the cycles by number, and the silence between them by shape. You don't speak because honestly, the math is already speaking for you. You're floating now. Well, not literally, but your mind sure is. After sitting with the sacred zero, it's hard not to feel like you've slipped into a different layer of understanding. You're not just learning anymore. You're tuning in, like you've been given a backstage pass to the universe's number system, and the Maya were the ones holding the clipboard all along. And now, just to show off a little, they're going to introduce you to their favorite planet, Venus. Not Mars, not Jupiter, not even the sun. No, the Maya were obsessed with the morning star. They tracked its every movement, rising, setting, vanishing, returning over and over. It wasn't just an astronomical curiosity. Venus was a divine schedule, a time bomb, a god's commute. You look up and there it is, bright, sharp, almost too perfect. The Maya knew exactly when Venus would reappear after its brief disappearance behind the sun. They called this period superior conjunction, and they calculated it to within days, sometimes even hours, using nothing but observation scratchy paper and math born from a dot line system. You shift to a flat rock where someone long ago once sat and recorded these cycles. You imagine them looking up, stylus and hand eyes locked on the planet. They didn't blink much. Missing a single rise or fall could throw off entire predictions. And if you got it wrong, people might die. Because here's the kicker. Venus wasn't just pretty, it was dangerous. Mainstream fact incoming Venus was closely tied to warfare and sacrifice. Maya rulers often planned battles based on the position of Venus. When it rose as the morning star after disappearing for about 90 days, it wasn't a pretty return, it was a call to action. A warning, a knife-sharp omen. And those who knew how to read it, priests, scribes, star watchers, held immense power. Because if you could predict Venus's return, you could predict fate. Plan sacrifices, stage raids, declare divine favor. Imagine being able to say, well, Venus rises next week, so I guess we invade then, and people listened. Because the math said so. You remember the Dresden Codex, that ancient Maya bark paper book, with jaguar-painted margins and celestial glyphs. There's an entire section devoted to Venus. It lays out an 8-year cycle split into 184-day segments. The time it takes Venus to return to the same place in the sky. And they nailed it. No telescopes, no metal instruments, just math and memory. Here's your quirky nugget. Venus's cycle doesn't divide cleanly into the solar year. But the Maya found a sync point, after 5 Venus cycles and 8 solar years. The story got 920 days. Everything lined back up. This wasn't discovered by accident. It took centuries of watching, writing, calculating. You try to remember your Netflix password and fail 3 times. These people memorized the sky. Historians still argue whether these Venus tables were used primarily for ritual astronomy or military strategy. Some say it was a calendar within a calendar, a parallel track to the Tzolk'in and Hob. Others insist it was a cosmic alarm clock, ringing only for kings and priests. Still others believe it was deeply personal. Your Venus cycle could dictate your own fate, depending on where in the calendar you were born. You close your eyes and picture a royal advisor explaining to the king, "My Lord Venus returns in 4 days. We light the torches on the temple, and we attack the Itza that night, and the king just nods. Because of course, the stars have spoken. And now, your fringe theory, some esoteric scholars claim that Maya Venus observations reveal an understanding of synodic rhythms, that hint at a proto-quantum awareness of light cycles. That's a lot of syllables to say they may have noticed wave behavior in celestial motion way before Einstein. Totally speculative. But given their obsession with duality recurrence and hidden phases, it's not completely out there. You open your eyes. Venus is climbing higher now, brighter. You feel a chill half from the air, half from the sheer accuracy of it all. The math behind that tiny dot in the sky was enough to shape wars, rituals, and dynasties. It's still used by modern Maya daykeepers to track balance and omen. And here's something beautiful. The Venus table in the Dresden Codex doesn't just mark risings. It also includes warnings, like bad omens for kings or disasters in the east. Math, yes, but also poetry. Predictive, fatalistic, dramatic poetry. You lie back against the rock hands behind your head, and suddenly you're doing the math in your own head. Not because you have to, but because you want to. You understand now. Math isn't just counting. It's timings. It's knowing when to speak, when to plant, when to fight, when to love, and when to wait for the morning star to rise. Because when it does, something always begins. You wake up under stars, not because you meant to fall asleep though, with all the chanting, counting, and cosmic math, who could blame you, but because the night itself has pulled you into its rhythm. The jungle murmurs, a toad chirps, somewhere a conch horn blows in slow spiraled sorrow. Tonight you're not just learning Maya math, you're feeling it. And here in the darkness, illuminated only by torchlight and fireflies, you're going to witness one of the most mind-bending aspects of their genius. This, the long count. This isn't just a calendar, it's a mathematical time machine. Russo. You sit on the edge of a carved stela, its surface worn but still legible. There's a priest nearby running his hand reverently over each glyph. It's a date. A number so huge it makes your brain itch. Oxul but the third states, not sure what so. What so? That's not a typo, that's a real date. The Maya long count recorded time in 5 units, backtunes 144,000 days, Katuns 7, 200 tunes, 360 winos 20 and kins 1. It's such a base 20 system. Except for that tricky second place, which is base 18 just to keep the solar cycle aligned. You heard that right, they bent the rules for better accuracy. And they weren't just counting days since a royal coronation or the start of a dynasty. No, the long count begins from a more mythic creation. Date. August 11th, 3114 BCE in our Gregorian calendar. That's over 5,000 years ago. The date 13.0.0.0 that marked December the 21st, 2012. Yes, that 2012. The one everyone thought meant the end of the world. Spoiler, it didn't. The Maya never said the world would end. That's a modern misunderstanding mashed together with apocalyptic popcorn logic. What it really meant, the end of a Bach tune. A big one, a full cycle complete. Imagine rolling the odometer on a galactic Chevy and watching it flip back to zero. But the number itself, 13.0.0.0, it's mathematically elegant, perfectly balanced, a sacred turning point. Mainstream fact check. The long count was used to track historical events over millennia. Inscriptions on stelae across Mesoamerica record dates going back to the first king, some as early as the 5th century CE, and they also project forward into dates thousands of years into the future. Some go as far as 4000 CE and beyond. Why? Because for the Maya, time wasn't a line. It was a spiral, a cycle, a breath that looped back on itself. And math was how they measured that spiral, precise, obsessive, sacred. You shift slightly and your hand brushes a carved number, 9.13.0.0.0. That's roughly 692 CE. Maybe the date of a tomb, a temple's dedication, a war. Every long count inscription was, anchored in history. And with enough glyphs, scholars can track them like pins on a timeline connecting Maya cities like Copan, Tikal, Calakmul, and Palenque into one giant network of math-based memory. Now here's your quirky nugget. Some stelae don't just tell time, they tell future time. There's one, for instance, that marks a ceremony in 1472 CEs. Historians are still trying to figure out whether that's meant as prophecy poetry or a kind of calendar flex. Either way, it's got real, I'll be dead, but still accurate energy. And now, for the fringe crowd, there are theories that the long count was designed not just for Earth time, but for galactic alignment, tracking cycles tied to the center of the Milky Way. Some say it's evidence of ancient contact with something more, that the Maya were mapping not just time, but was space-time. Is there proof? Not exactly, but the numbers line up suspiciously well with certain processional wobbles. Creepy maybe, cool definitely. You lean back and close your eyes, and now you're imagining what it felt like to be a Maya scribe, carving these numbers into stone with a jaguar tooth chisel, your hands trembling, not from fear, but from because each number wasn't just a figure. It was a message to the future. You touch the glyphs again. You can feel their age, their certainty. The math is still here thousands of years later, accurate to the day. It survived jungle-rot empire collapse, conquest fire, and every human error imaginable. Because good math outlives everything. The priest nearby begins to chant softly. Numbers. You recognize them now as sequence of tunes, katunes, baktunes. A countdown, a record, a reminder. It doesn't matter. Because whether the number marks a king's birth, an eclipse, or a date 5,000 years into the future, it means the same thing. Time is still ticking. And the Maya, they've already measured it. The fire is low now. The priest has gone. The stars are high, and you're left alone in a clearing surrounded by silent stone, the lingering scent of copal resin hanging like a veil in the air. You think you've seen it all, but just when you're ready to call it a night, something unexpected arrives to bend your brain a little further. Someone hands you a ball, not a leather one, not rubber. A solid, weighty hunk of vulcanized latex, thick, dense, and bouncy in a way that makes your fingers twitch. You look up and realize you're standing on the edge of a massive ball court. Stone walls sloping inwards, rings high above carved like miniature solar halos. But this isn't a sports arena. It's a carbon math arena. And the game. It's got rules, points, strategy. But under all of it, there's calendar math, baked into every bounce. You sit down on one of the worn stone benches and let your eyes follow the court's lines. The proportions are oddly precise, not randomly sized or thrown together. The dimensions, length to width, slope to angle ring, placement to echo pattern, have meaning. Some scholars even believe the court represents the universe itself, with players acting out cosmic balance through movement, precision, and timing. Here's your mainstream fact. Many Maya ball courts were aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, Venus risings. When the ball hit the ring or the floor, it echoed with directional sound. The court became a calculator. Every bounce was a beat in the great celestial rhythm. And the numbers, oh, they were everywhere. The game itself often revolved around 13 and 20. Sacred base numbers in the Maya counting system. Teams had 2, 4, 7 players, depending on ritual structure, with 13 as a commonly occurring total. Some courts even have 160 carved glyphs, one for every day of the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar. But what about that quirky tidbit, glad you asked? Some researchers believe the ballgame scorekeeping was deliberately obscured, more symbolic than literal. That is, winning wasn't the point. The cycle of play mattered more. The rebounds, the rhythm, in some versions getting the ball through the ring, ended. The game abruptly, just like reaching the end of a calendar cycle. Was that good or bad? Depends on the city, depends on the day, depends on the math. You lean forward thinking about that, how in modern games we chase victory, but here it's the cycle that mattered, the pattern. And suddenly you see the players not as athletes but as human numerals, representing days, God's glyphs. They weren't just passing the ball, they were carrying time, from one end of the court to the other. Now here's where the fringe slides, and a few fringe historians believe the most elite versions of the ballgame were tied to ritualized particle movement. That's right, ancient Mesoamericans acting out cosmic subatomic dances before quantum theory was even a glimmer. Is there hard evidence? No. Is the ball's weight and bounce eerily tuned to natural harmonic ratios? Maybe. Is it spooky that Maya priests chanted prime number rhythms during games extremely? Back to reality, you're watching a match now. Real players, they wear padded belts and rubber protectors. Their movements are exact, stylized. There's something mathematical about the way they position their bodies sideways, always sideways hitting the ball, with their hips echoing old glyphs that warn use your hands and you're done. Gyaku. Each hit echoes, each bounce seems to fall on a beat. You start counting 1, 2, 3, realizing the tempo matches a calendar chant you heard earlier. This isn't random. This is ritualized numerology in motion. And yes, sometimes, when stakes were high, these games were followed by sacrifice. Not always the losers, mind you, that's another misunderstanding. In many cities, the winners were honored, elevated, sometimes offered, because they'd proven their mathematical alignment with the gods. You don't earn that with brute strength, you earn it with cosmic rhythm. Historians still argue whether the ball game was originally a religious rite that morphed into sport or the other way around. Was it born from warrior training? Was it calendrical theater? Maybe both, maybe neither, maybe it doesn't matter. Because standing here now, watching the ball sail in a perfect arc, you don't see athletes, you see moving math. Living calendars. The game ends when the ball makes that satisfying chuk through the stone ring. The crowd gasps. A priest raises a hand. A number is chanted. A date is declared. The cycle is closed. And somewhere in the scribe's chamber, someone marks the moment on bark paper, a shell, a dot, a line. And so the game lives on, not just in memory, but in equation. You exhale slowly. You finally get it. The Maya didn't need calculators. Oh, they were calculators. And their games, their rituals, their architecture, just different ways of expressing the same thing. That the universe isn't chaos. It's math. You're walking again. But this time it's along a raised stone causeway, a wazak but white and chalky stretching straight through the forest, like a ruler laid across the world. It's strangely level, strangely deliberate. You run your fingers along its edge, still smooth after centuries of rain root and hoof, and you start to realize that even there, roads were mathematical. You're not on just any old jungle trail. You're walking on a measured time. The Maya didn't build their world randomly. Cities were placed using astronomical sightlines. Temples were spaced by ritual intervals. Even roads, these Sak-Beob, were laid out to reflect cosmic geometry. The world was a spreadsheet, and now you're pacing its columns. Here's a mainstream fact. Many Maya roads connected major ritual centers, and their alignments often point not to the nearest destination, but to celestial events. Some stretch dead straight for miles longer than the eye can follow, pointing toward the spot on the horizon where Venus first rises or where the sun sets on solstice. This wasn't accidental. It was a landscape math, a geometry you had to walk to fill. You stop and look around. To the east, ruins. To the west, a pyramid. You close your eyes, stretch out your arms. The air is heavy with calculation. Everything's connected not by whim, but by numbers. And now, for your quirky nugget, the Maya word Sakbe literally means white road, because these highways were often paved with crushed limestone, which gleamed phosphorescent white under moonlight. So yes, they literally all glowed in the dark. Try finding that on your GPS. You imagine messengers runners called Oholkanab, dashing barefoot along these roads carrying messages and tribute. But not just, hey the king wants more cacao. We're talking numbers, measurements, astronomical predictions, calendar updates. In a world without horses or wheels, information moved on, foot, and every footfall echoed with math. Now, here's where we get fringe. Some Maya scholars believe the very act of walking certain routes during ritual periods was a numerical invocation, a living procession of meaning. Imagine that your feet forming part of a calculation, your route aligning you with celestial geometry. Forget your 10,000 steps a day. Try syncing your steps to a Venus cycle. So, historians still argue whether the Sak-Beob were primarily trade routes, ritual paths, or non-symbolic markers, but many believe they served on multiple purposes, practical for goods, mystical for gods, geometric for scribes. The Maya weren't big on single-function design. If they could make a road double as a calendar, they absolutely would. You continue along the causeway in the jungle parts ahead. You find yourself staring up at a giant stela, half swallowed by vines. It's got numbers, glyphs, a date, and something familiar. 13.01 The long count again, but slightly after the famous 2012 cycle flip. You smile. The Maya didn't believe the world would end at 13.00. They believed it would just keep going, cycle after cycle, step after step, dot after line after shell. You pull a stick from the ground and begin sketching in the dirt 1 dot. That's 1. 2 dots. Then 3. You draw a line. That's 5. Another line. That's 10. You pause. You draw a nutshell 0. Not the absence of meaning, but its beginning. You finally understand what they were doing, not just with temples and calendars and markets, but with the very architecture of thought. They didn't just build cities, they built patterns, systems that reinforced memory time and spiritual gravity. You couldn't walk through a Maya world without walking through math, and you couldn't walk through their math without feeling the sacredness of movement. Even the buildings were arranged in numerical groupings. Some aligned to 13 the heavens, others to 9 the underworld, or 4 cardinal directions. Some temples had exactly 91 steps, times 4 sides makes 364. Add the top platform, boom, 365. So welcome to your pyramid calendar. You're starting to feel dizzy with it all, not in a bad way, we're in the Matrix way. Because everything, the steps, the sun, the glyphs, the glow in the dark road you're standing on, it's all precise. Thought through, tied into something that's almost too big to see all at once. Almost. And then just as the wind picks up and the trees begin to sway, you realize you're not alone. A child is beside you. She's maybe 9, wearing a cotton tunic, holding a bowl of clay and a stick. She doesn't speak. She just kneels beside your dirt drawings and adds a dot. That's 4. You smile and she nods approvingly, silently, because now you're speaking the same language. The language of numbers. You sit beside her. The little girl with the clay bowl in the quiet confidence of a high priestess in miniature. She presses another dot into the earth. That's 5. A line. She wipes her fingers on her tunic like she's just solved a theorem. And to be fair, she kinda has. She's not just playing. She's practicing a language passed down, generation by generation, whispered through grandmothers, carved by fathers, etched in stone and smoke and breath. It's math, but not the cold kind. It's living, worn smooth by time. You sit back and watch her work, realizing that this education was the Maya's secret weapon. Not metal, not horses, not even pyramids, but knowledge transfer. A society where math wasn't reserved for elites. It was cultural fluency. Here's your mainstream fact: while most Maya scribes came from the nobility, basic numeracy was woven into daily life. Farmers needed it to plant by the tzolkin, traders used it to haggle, artisans used it to space out designs with perfect symmetry. Each bead, each stitch placed with rhythmic logic. And the kids, they learned early, not by rote memorization, but through the story and pattern. Want to teach subtraction, frame it as a myth about a jaguar stealing days from the moon. Multiplication, a tale of maize spirits growing from 1 kernel to 20. It wasn't just math, it was cosmology in code. Now, for your quirky tidbit, some Maya children practice counting with seashells and cacao beans, rolling them around in bowls or on bark mats. These weren't just toys, they were physical abacuses, each tap and slide reinforcing the sacred numbers. No screens, no apps, just beans and fingers and sunlight. You watch as the girl draws a spiral around her numbers. Not part of the calculation, just flair. Artistic license, because for the Maya, form and function were never far apart. Their numerals were glyphs, after all. Beautiful to look at, pleasing to ink. Aesthetic math, if such a thing can exist, and it does here. She finishes, pats the dirt, and looks at you like a teacher asking, "So what have you learned?" You grin, but before you can answer, you're interrupted by a deep rhythmic sound. Drums. You turn, not battle drums, not warnings. These are low pulsing ceremonial. They echo off temple walls and dance through the forest like heartbeat thunder. You follow the sound curious, then captivated, and emerge into a plaza flickering with torchlight. And there it is, a math ritual in motion. At the center, a circle of dancers moves in time to the beat. Each step, a day counted. Each spin, a cycle marked. You watch as priests with bark paper codices chant numbers. 13, 20, 260, 360, 7, 200. Not random. These are the sacred numbers of the calendars, and they're dancing them into being. Mainstream fact, the Maya often conducted ritual math in public day-keeping ceremonies that reinforced the community's connection to time. The calendar wasn't tucked away in a tower. It was performed, sunk, tattooed into memory. You didn't just know it, you felt or it. Now, the fringe, some argue these public ceremonies were part of mnemonic training systems. Early proto-neuroscience, chants synced with beats aligned with movements reinforced by visuals, an embodied algorithm. If that's true, Maya ceremonies weren't just spiritual, they were cognitive enhancements, brain fuel via body math. The lead priest holds up a conch shell and blows. The plaza quiets. He raises a hand and draws a number in the air. You recognize it. 1.1 line. That's 6. 6 what? 6 is atunes. That's over 43,000 days, nearly 120 years. The crowd gasps not out of confusion, but respect. They know what it means. A cycle is ending, and a new one's about to begin. The plaza shifts. Drums start again. The dancers realign. You look up at the temple walls and see numerals carved everywhere. Not as graffiti, as anchors, placeholders, sacred bookmarks in the great cosmic spreadsheet. Briska. The girl has followed you. She tugs your sleeve, then points at a stela glowing in the firelight. It reads, 1 baktun. That's 144,000 days. You say it out loud. She nods. Because now you speak Maya time. You speak harder math. And in that moment, watching dancers spiral glyphs shimmer and children press numbers into dust, you realize something. This isn't just history. This is a legacy. A living equation still calculating long after the pencil broke and the calculator battery died. And you're part of it now. You don't know how long you've been standing there. The torches are burning lower now, their orange halos flickering against the stone. The drums have faded into silence, replaced by the occasional hoot of a distant owl and the rustling hush of jungle leaves breathing in the wind. The little girl is gone. The plaza is empty, but the numbers are still here glowing in your mind like embers. You're not dreaming, at least not in the normal sense. You're just in the in-between. That strange hush where history stops being something you read and starts being something you remember. You walk slowly now, almost reverently, into a final chamber. Small, round, completely dark except for a thin shaft of moonlight cutting across the center. You step into it and realize this isn't just a chamber. It's an old calendar vault. Etched into the floor is a spiral of numbers. Each ring is a cycle, each symbol a unit of time. You crouch down and run your fingers over them. You can feel the rough grooves of thousands of days, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. It's overwhelming. Here's your historical anchor. Some of the longest Maya inscriptions stretch well into millions of days, documenting time far beyond recorded human history. They wrote of events before their civilization began, and after it would end. Some long counts reference dates, billions of days away, almost playful, as if to say, yeah, we know you'll never get there, but we did the math anyway. And maybe that's the final lesson. They weren't doing this to impress us. They weren't calculating to dominate. They weren't interested in building bigger walls or sharper swords. They were building context. You lean back, staring up at the stone ceiling. There's a carving there, too, of a serpent swallowing a dot. The zero again, full circle. And now, for your quirky end-of-script treat, some codices refer to time as wukalaiki, literally, the remembering of days. Time wasn't something you passed through. It was something you carried like a bundle of firewood or a story you told again and again until the edges wore smooth and the meaning grew deeper. Historians still argue whether the Maya truly saw time as a cyclical soul or layered. Was each baktun a repetition or an echo, Were they just resetting the calendar or unfolding a larger spiral that never truly ends? Some say they saw history not as linear progression, but as resonance, where future and past could mirror, overlap, even whisper to one another. You like that idea? It feels true. You stand now one last time and trace the spiral back to its center, the shell, zero, and you understand. The Maya weren't just brilliant mathematicians, they were Greek cartographers of time. Not just counting it, but mapping its terrain, marking its mountains and rivers, its peaks of prophecy and valleys of silence. And while we stare at screens and swipe to refresh the same day over and over, they carved eternity into stone, with dots and lined and one perfectly empty old shell. The vault is quiet, the moon is high, the jungle breathes around you. And as your footsteps echo softly back out into the night, you whisper a simple truth. They didn't need calculators. They were already ahead of us. You did it. You made it through jungle markets and temple staircases, through counting songs and cosmic spiral, through battles planned by planets and calendars carved into stone. The Maya world didn't just count days, it sung them, wore them, danced them. And now, whether you meant to or not, a little of that rhythm is curled up quietly inside your chest. So slow you're breathing now. Feel the night settle in around your shoulders, soft as obsidian ash. You don't need to remember every date or every glyph. Just let the feeling remain, that gentle tick of invisible numbers flowing like water behind the sky. That sense that everything is measured not in minutes or hours, but in meaning. There's something deeply comforting about that. That somewhere centuries ago, someone stood in a stone room, just like you did, calculating the moon's next blink, or the king's next breath, not to control the world, but to understand. I just nailed it. So drift now. Let the echoes fade. Let the stars spin slowly across your ceiling. And if you dream of zero tonight, of quiet shells and whispered numbers, that's just the Maya still counting with you from very, very far away. Sleep well, traveler of time. End of script. Sweet dreams. you.